Backup's probably the most critical thing. It doesn't matter about anything in your network, because the only thing that you can't replace is your data. It's the most critical part of your IT system. So making sure that you guys have the proper backups is probably 80% of what you have to do. To make sure that they're secured and that they're done properly, to make sure that you don't lose data. You need to have an on-site and off-site backup. A lot of places we come into, they'll have a hard drive that's plugged into a computer. And I'll ask, is that backing up your computers? Yeah, it's definitely backing it up. Okay, what happens if there's a flood or a fire or something damage to your firehouse or somebody steals it? What do you guys do in that situation? Like, oh, we'll rotate it. When's the last time you rotated it? Maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. So there's systems out there that are pretty inexpensive that you can use to back up your systems. You can use an online backup system that encrypts your data, backs it up off-site, and also backs up onto a hard drive. So you have two backups. You have a local backup, and you also have an off-site backup in case there's any issues on-site. Software needs to be backed up to the latest version of the software. We'll also see a lot of places, either fire departments or non-fire departments, that the software was installed and they've had it running for 10, 15 years and they've never updated it. Some of the updates are not just for new features, some of the updates are for security reasons. These software vendors will find there's vulnerabilities. Almost all your fire department software runs off of SQL. SQL has to be updated all the time because that's how people can penetrate and create vulnerabilities for you. So by upgrading that software is also upgrading the SQL database that runs your fire department software. And if that's not updated, if it is 10 years old, then every year that goes on, there's more vulnerability for somebody creating damage. Even if it's not a hacker that's sitting at home that has intentions of hacking your system. If a virus gets on your system, they're designed to look for older SQL software. So if it finds a SQL software that's 10 years old, it might inject its virus and delete everything in your database. So that's something to be aware of.
The public safety gave holds a party up on Federal Hill, drinking and apparently smoking marijuana, once again getting behind the
And interviewed for an hour and a half, stayed for the whole interview. His reply to marijuana was it was just a cigar.
That's a cigar. You know, I gotta tell you, she wants to buy that.
It is a great interview. I highly suggest that you Google it. You'll find it out there. Also, just happens to be outside Boston. But the interview went on for an hour and a half. It was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever seen. And the chief actually stayed the whole interview. They kept asking, this marijuana, well, why are you passing it? Why is a guy rolling it and licking it? It's all on film. And he tries so hard to stay out of it. And he even tries to get up. And the interviewer says, no, stay here. We got to finish this interview. And he actually says, okay, yeah, I understand. I got to finish the interview. But he stood there for the whole thing and made himself look horrible. So also, you got to be aware that the news is out there filming you. The thing is criminal actions. Here is a prank of a paid firehouse down in Texas of a prank that occurred. Everybody actually got arrested involved in this one. Guy comes running in with a gun. They had 2 new probies at this firehouse, so the whole thing was to scare the new probies. There's a real firearm with blanks in it. Discharges the weapon. And you clearly see their firehouse uniforms are on. They posted it on the internet as well. Posted it on Facebook, and thought it was really funny. So those 2 new probies filed suit against them. They said where it was filmed at. They actually posted who filmed it, while the supervisors and the You can't incriminate yourself any more than what these guys did. So, like I say, it's amazing. Our company's focus is to bring safe IT to the fire service. So as we research these things, it's incredible what we find out there. So what are the key findings of these different audit items? Disaster plan, disaster plan, disaster plan. Like I said, the biggest thing in every audit that they find is that there's no disaster recovery plan. So what is a disaster recovery plan? Disaster should be, district should develop a disaster recovery plan. What it is how your systems are backed up. Do you guys back up just on a thumb drive? Do you guys have outside means of backing it up remotely? What's your process of backing it up? Is somebody responsible for the backup? So it's planning out exactly how you guys are performing backups in your firehouse. Who's responsible for the backups? Who's the designated person in your firehouse that's responsible for checking those backups? Who's the, if it's an outside vendor or if it's somebody in your firehouse, how often are you checking those backups? Define a disaster recovery team. As funny as that might sound, what did that department outside of Boston do? They just called their IT vendor. There was no formal process to handle that incident that occurred. You need to have an actual disaster recovery team. It could be as simple as 3 members that know a lot about your computers. And the purpose of that team is to, as soon as there's an incident like this, there's ransomware that hits your department or somebody comes in and deletes all your data, they get activated and they come in with these policies and procedures that are written and bring in the data. It could be just bringing in the data from a remote location, bring it in from your backups. Basically, they're responsible for getting your department back online as fast as possible. Backup order procedures. So it's great that you have all these things. You have backup, you guys have a disaster recovery plan, but you bring all that data down and then the data doesn't work. So all that planning and all that preparation did absolutely nothing. So you should also be auditing your data backups. Just as simple as going onto your backups and pick out 2 or 3 files. Did they come down on your machine? Were you able to access those files? Did everything work out okay? So just because backups were occurring, as they were just outside of Boston, they said that backups were going on, but nobody knew that they were actually valid. They brought down the backups and there was no valid data down there. It was all corrupted. And how long was that for? It could have been done as simple as once every 3-4 months, just auditing your data, just randomly checking, making sure that it's okay. A couple of my favorite lines recently that I heard is, as we just said, out in Salisbury, I lost everything, every document I ever had. It's unbelievable. Who would ever think that someone would? Another one was I actually pulled out of a comptroller's office audit. The IT provider stated that they're unaware of the requirements of the New York State OSC and would be researching the audit findings to properly implement these recommendations. So not even your IT vendor may know what needs to be done. So that's why it's very important, to have a fire department specific pre-audit to really look at your IT system, make sure to keep your IT provider honest, or somebody that's doing stuff in the firehouse, make sure they're doing the right thing. Make sure you guys are prevented from these issues.
In our fire district, we have a potential problem with flash drives.
Yep.
And we're very, very strict about what we allow to put on a flash drive because they get lost in parking lots or whatever. And that's a chance to lose some real confidential information.
Yeah, some things on flash drives real quick. The reason that we don't suggest doing the flash drive exchange of backups because they could get lost in the parking lot, they could get lost out of the house, they could, it's not a secure means of transferring data. So a lot of computers now actually have software built on them that prevents you from plugging in a flash drive because members can plug in a flash drive and have a virus on it and they can enter your network. They can take information off of your network. So flash drives are very difficult to work in the business environment. You'll see now that flash drives are pretty much being banned, especially in the higher level corporations, that when you plug in the flash drive, it actually will deny it from running on your computer. So flash drives are definitely a vulnerability for districts. So I agree.
Pretty basic question. Newer fire has been struggling with the concept of how do we allow commissioners access to the financial information. Currently, our Secretary and Treasurer is the only one that has that. So what kind of policies should we try to say that, we fit the parameters
Sure.
of access there?
Yeah, we're finding more and more the state is keying in on financial data with the districts, so it's very critical. I probably would assume that almost everybody was using QuickBooks for that. There's lots of vendors out there, but they're the most popular. And the policies and procedures really should be that there should be individual users that have rights and access to log into it. It really doesn't matter who has access to it as long as the district deems that they have rights to access it. But very importantly, there should be individual logins. Technically, you should be changing the passwords about twice a year so that they don't keep using the same password. The password should be written on a piece of paper left under the computer that you use to access it. Those are a lot of the best practices. Updating it, we'll come to some districts and they're running QuickBooks 2006. Once again, it doesn't update it every year, but every couple of years you should be updating that QuickBooks software. Remote access is also becoming very prevalent as CPA firms are outsourcing their services to these districts. So in those cases, you got to, once again, they don't control remote access, you guys control remote access, and should implement the remote access that allows you guys to control who's accessing it. So it's, first determine who you guys are going to allow access into the system, and then kind of follow the best practices. Anybody else?